They said, you have Lyme disease and you have a chronic form of leukemia. And I was just like mind blown. That's 93 to 97% of our brain's processing power is the subconscious mind, what we call the subconscious mind. The automatic processing that just occurs, part of your mental programming that's taking you in a direction opposite from the direction you want to go in. And once that happens, the alcohol, the cigarettes, the gambling, whatever it is, just fades away.
All right. Welcome to the Evolving Potential Podcast. This is episode number 26. Today I have on the show Peter McLaughlin. Peter is a certified hypnotherapist, life coach, and the founder of Blue Sky Hypnosis. Peter came across hypnosis after a leukemia diagnosis in 2003, pushed him to look into the power of the mind and even the spirit for healing. His work helps people uncover the root causes of struggles such as weight loss, relationships, performance, and anxiety. Peter's YouTube channel has amassed over 120,000 subscribers and more than 17 million views, covering content ranging from self-sabotage, rewiring the mind, to past life regression. He's also an author of a book called Becoming the Customer, Empathy, Influence, and Closing the Sale, and currently working on a book called Healing the Wounds of Time. Peter's journey also includes being a salesman, an actor, and a volunteer firefighter and EMT. So he's all over the place. I can't wait to talk with this guy. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Okay, so I'm very curious about, obviously, the entryway into hypnosis. Being a logical guy myself, how do you come across hypnosis? What are your initial thoughts about it? And then how do you kind of move into, being interested in wanting to study it?
That's where some of these weird threads come together. So it was in 2003, I was volunteering to be a firefighter in this town we had moved to in Connecticut. It was in the wake of 9/11. And I volunteered, I had to do an extensive physical, breathing test and all this stuff. All that went great. I think I was like 40 or 41 at the time. And they said, oh, wow, you're in really good shape for a 41-year-old. And the next day, these alarm bells started going off. I started getting all of these calls with these panicked messages. And when I contacted the doctor's office, they said, you have Lyme disease and you have a chronic form of leukemia. And I was just like mind blown. Yeah. And I thought that can't be true. I went back in, they retested my blood. They came up with the same results. And then I just started on this odyssey of trying to get emotionally my mind around what had happened. I think I was going through like the 12 steps of grief. I was denying it for a while. I was bargaining. I remember beating the steering wheel of my car when I was driving. I was so angry about it. I was going through all of these steps, and it didn't happen right away. It took until 2006. But the more I studied what was going on, because the hematologist oncologist said to me, we don't know what causes this, meaning the leukemia, and we don't know how to cure it. And I just thought to myself, what the fuck am I doing here? Why am I sitting in your office talking to you when I know you can maybe give me 10 minutes a day or 10 minutes a visit, not a day, visit. Yeah. And she was a nice person, and I saw the picture of her family behind her, and I thought, you probably have how many clients? How many patients? And you got a family. Like, it's not your fault, but the business model is not going to let you, spend hours a day on my case.
Yeah.
And the second time I went to see her, I had done a little bit of research, and I said to her, do you know how many people get this form of leukemia in this country every year? And she didn't know. And the answer was like 3,000, 3,500. And I said, of that number, do you know how many are under the age of 55? And at the time I was 41. She didn't know. And it was like 5%. I was in this like teeny tiny group. And then I said, based on that number, how many of those people do you think were simultaneously diagnosed with Lyme disease? And her mouth kind of she is nice. She's not going to help me. She's already told me that. We don't know what causes it. We don't know how to cure it.
Yeah.
I had my own business at the time. I was running a security guard company that I owned, and I had 50 employees, and I just kind of put it on autopilot. I just did the invoices, I just did the payroll, I just did the bare minimum. And the rest of the time I got online and I just started studying. And the more I studied, the more I went from pure physical cause and effect to the mental aspects of this, and the mental aspect would affect your mood, and your mood would affect the cells of your body, like epigenetics, it's called, higher in genetics. And then that brought me, the more I learned, and once I started practicing, into the spiritual dimensions of this, that there's something even higher. So that's my condensed version of this, what I call an odyssey.
Yeah.
Of how I got into hypnosis. Because I guess the last piece to tie together is, at some point, I thought I have to learn how to control my mind in order to stay alive. Because when I asked at the original doctor's office how long I had, they said maybe 10 years. And that was in 2003. And I had little kids at the time. They were all I had 3 of them under 10 years old at the time. And I was so freaked out about not being there for them and not being with my wife and all that stuff. Yeah. So it was, and so I was wanting to know how I could fire in all cylinders. I could deal with the physical stuff, I could deal with the emotional stuff, and then I could deal with the mental stuff. And through a series of kind of seemingly random events, including a person walking into another business I had owned at the time. It was like a little shipping and packing store where we had an eBay consignment. She walks in with a box and it says Hypnotherapy Academy of America, Santa Fe, New Mexico. And she puts it down on the counter and says, I want to ship that box. And I looked at it, I'm like, whoa, hypnotherapy, that's cool. And we got into like this hour-long conversation about it.
Dang.
Well, a couple other things happened, and then I watched the movie The Secret, and I looked it to my wife halfway through it, and I said, I need to be a hypnotist. And she looked at me and she said, yes, you do. And so I did all this research, and I kept coming back to that one place in Santa Fe. And that's where I ended up going, because they had this adjunctive medical focus with hypnosis and hypnotherapy. And the guy who had started the school was a former paramedic. And at the time, so I kept going through, and I became a volunteer firefighter and an EMT. And I really identified with that at the time. And so I thought, wow, he's in my world. He understands that part of my life.
Yeah.
So that's that's the story of how I followed this weird path to becoming a hypnotist.
That's absolutely crazy.
Isn't it?
So you end up going to that school,
Yep.
and you're very, very intrigued by this whole thing. And then do you start to see results for yourself? Do you start practicing with people right away? Do you where does the spark kind of come to be like, oh, this is the thing, I want to do this?
Well, the school, for me, the school was all encompassing. It was long days, 10-hour days, 5 days a week, Monday through Friday. This is when everything was still in person. Even that school now, they've moved from Santa Fe to Albuquerque, and it's basically online now, which I get, because I do online sessions and they're super effective, but that experience was amazing because we were in person every day for 10 hours. And then on the weekends, we would go to each other's apartments because we were all from somewhere else, and we would practice with each other, and we would do other kinds of work together. So it was this totally immersive experience that I feel helped to transform me, as opposed to just teaching me. So I was learning on all these different levels. And I was also able to work with the instructors. They wanted you to do that, where you were the client, where you're sitting in the chair.
Yep.
And I swear I came back a different person. I was told I would by the person that I discussed, entering. And it's true. I came back. And the biggest thing I noticed when I came back was the anger that I had inside of me that would really come out big time when my kids, who were little, would do silly little things. It wouldn't just be a minor irritation. I'd get like really mad, and I could feel it taking over my body. That was gone when I came back. It had completely vanished. And I was just like, wow, this is incredible. This is amazing. What was able to happen just with respect to that. And I didn't even go there to deal with anger. I didn't even know it was a huge problem. But that's an example of an immediate result. And when I came back, everybody who graduated was feeling like, oh, I don't know if I'm ready. And they were like, you're going to have that feeling. You just have to put one foot in front of the other. And I decided to work with people that I already knew and just do trades with them. So trade with a graphic designer, trade with a web person, trade with whomever. And after I did about 3 of those sessions and they were reporting positive results, I thought, okay, I'm ready to start practicing. And I did that for a number of years, part-time. I would do it in the evenings and I would do it on Saturdays. And then I went to full-time in 2016. I think it was 2016, 2017, somewhere around there. I just cut the cord with everything else and focused on this full-time.
You've been doing this for like eight years now,
full-time, right?
Yeah.
But, 18 years since, I started working with people.
Jeez. My own personal experience going through like the NLP and hypnosis, I felt very, very similar, so for anyone watching is curious about neurolinguistic programming or hypnosis, it's like whether you're going there for tools to, influence people or whatever it might be, or just for personal growth, like it was profound too. I personally wasn't ready to sit there. And this is like the idea of like logical and subconscious mind. I wasn't ready to sit there and answer from the subconscious when they had asked certain questions and kind of want you to like tap into the subconscious mind and like, what's the deeper answer? Where this first come from, this limiting belief, where's it originate? And it was like so hard for me to be like, I don't know. And we get frustrated and get annoyed and get like all these things. And so I went there ready to learn the skill. I didn't go there ready to be a client, if you will say, patient, a client. And that experience for me alone was transformative. So it's like for anyone, interested, I highly recommend it. So I'm definitely curious about, you moving into learning about the different ways in which our mind works and learning about the different ways in which we're sabotaging ourselves. And do you feel like you came up against any of those yourself? Because you kind of just talked about going straight into it. And so it's like,
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we're all in the same boat together. We're all equipped with the same hardware and software, basically, and when I say software, I mean, our mental, the way our minds work. And we're all, at least, the people we interact with have been raised by the same culture that is essentially a 5-sense reality culture. And it basically says, if you can't see, taste, touch, hear, or feel it, it doesn't exist. Seeing is believing. And so we give lip service to, oh, stress will kill you. Oh, yeah. Oh, it'll kill you. And it's important to meditate. Oh, yeah, it's important to meditate. But there's no real linkage on a widespread basis between, say, primary care physicians and patients. They'll give it lip service, but they won't really know, well, how do I de-stress, doctor? Well, take a vacation. Okay, great. So I'm working 52 weeks a year. Maybe I can afford to take 2 weeks. Maybe I can't. I leave for 2 weeks. I feel great. And then I come back. Now what? I'm back in the same soup. They haven't really taken that awareness and translated it into a practice, a way for people to actually reduce their stress. I mean, I told you the story about how I went to Santa Fe with this anger problem. Talk about something that creates stress. And when I came back, it was gone. A primary care physician doesn't know how to do that other than tell you to take a vacation or tell you to take a pharmaceutical, tell you to take a pill. And what does the pill do? The pill numbs it. And my feeling is that the root cause is always what we should be looking for. And if you just numb it, it's not actually dealing with the root cause. So you might be a customer for life And maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. Maybe it partially works. Maybe it works for a while and then it doesn't work anymore. Maybe it works, but it deadens other parts of your life.
Mm.
You know? And I see that approach, and I'm sure that there are times when it's warranted for a period of time. And I'm not a doctor, so I want to make that very clear to people. Don't take my advice on anything. Do your own research. But with your car, if your car was pulling to the right, if it was making a weird noise, if smoke was coming out of the engine, and you brought it to the mechanic, and the mechanic said, oh, just if it's pulling to the right, just overcompensate to the left. You know, if the smoke's coming out of the engine, we can install a fan to blow that away. If it's making a weird noise, just turn up the radio. No problem.
Yeah.
No one would accept that.
Yep. Yeah, I have a similar thought with like the cutting the cord. It's like, oh, I fixed it. Yeah, the light's off. The check engine light turned off. You're like, okay, great, thanks.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's crazy. Okay, so can we talk about some of the root causes that you have seen that are at the basis of a lot of these issues, whether it's, moving forward into a new career or, overcoming an addiction or losing weight or whatever, like, I guess we can kind of either start with what is the subconscious mind and how does it work? That might be a smart way to start, and then kind of move into the root causes being implanted within there.
Yeah. Yeah. And that will help to understand, for people to understand, I think, why a doctor, an MD, who's trained in allopathic medicine, which is really just one vertical of human health, as you know. Like there's all of these different approaches, philosophies of human health. And allopathy is just one of them. And allopathy means to relieve the symptoms. It doesn't mean to find and resolve the root cause. It means to relieve the symptoms. So that's what they do. And these people are trained basically like scientists. And so they're still operating in a decidedly material way. And when I was an EMT, what I recognized was that they taught us that there's two kinds of medicine. There's trauma. Someone's been shot, they've fallen out of a tree, they were in a motor vehicle accident, and they've got broken bones, they've got contusions, they've got puncture, whatever it is that they have, that's trauma. And there's chronic disease, medical. These are the people with cancer and heart disease and really the things that are killing the most people in our country. And I felt at some point, like when I was taking somebody to the hospital, when I got them packaged up and I was taking them to the hospital, if I was taking them there for trauma, I was like, this is the best possible place for them to be. I'm so excited that they're going to get the greatest care. If I was taking them for medical, I personally, I did not feel good about that.
Mm-hmm.
Because they weren't treating the root cause, and again, I'm not a doctor, so don't take my advice, but I feel like the understanding about this, the question you asked about the subconscious mind, and this blows me away still, and no one knows for sure, but the estimates are that 93 to 97%, that's 93 to 97% of our brain's processing power is the subconscious mind, what we call the subconscious mind, the automatic processing that just occurs. You and I are not regulating our digestion right now. We're not regulating our immune system. We're not regulating our body's core temperature consciously. We're doing it subconsciously, automatically. And that we have, again, no one knows for sure, but it gives you the idea, 20,000, 60,000 thoughts a day. And we're aware of like 3% of those. And the rest of it is just going on underneath the surface. Mm. And it's this incredibly efficient system. If we had to think every moment, remember to breathe, remember to beat your heart, remember to regulate your immune, digestive, reproductive, body temperature, we'd fall apart. We couldn't do it. But we have this amazing system that does that for us. And beliefs are another part of the system. It's part of our mental programming. And one of the things I remember somebody asking me on the phone, And I was stumped when they said, what is a belief? I'm like, well, what do you mean? Everybody knows what a belief is. And I was fumbling around, blah, 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 blah. And the answer was, it's a marriage of an idea and an emotion.
Mm.
And when these two things merge and fuse together, you have a belief. And the idea part of it doesn't have to be true. It could be false. Like, you're worthless, right? But once it fuses with an emotion, now you have a belief. And that belief behaves like programming in your computer. When it gets activated, like Control-Alt-Delete or whatever the keystroke is, or triggered, when somebody says something to you or says it to you in a certain way, or you see something, it fires off and it runs its program. And it does this automatically. And that is part of the key of solving something, helping a person solve a problem. You know, I know because we talked ahead of time and you were saying you studied NLP and a little bit of hypnosis. And so you understand, no doubt, the concept of a limiting belief, a part of your mental programming that's taking you in a direction opposite from the direction you want to go in. It's limited you. And so the next question for me, in terms of root cause, is, okay, so what is the foundational structure upon which the superstructure of cause and effect is residing, is resting upon? You know, the symptom, the negative symptom that you have, the negative outcome you have, has a whole chain that it rests upon for its very existence. And if you are able to kick out the foundation that supports that superstructure, that negative or limiting belief system doesn't have an ability to survive anymore. It has either no or very limited power.
Mm. Yes, I see. So like an example, you know, maybe like a kid, you know, believing they're not good enough, which I feel like is important to mention. It could be from negligence or from a statement, language. You know, oh, hey, you haven't been good enough today. Hey, you know, you're not a good enough kid, or whatever. Someone might say to someone, or just being ignored. So someone has like a belief put in there, and then they start looking for evidence of that from that point on. From it's like, okay, I have this belief, I have an idea that I'm not good enough, and I have this emotion of, oh man, this feels shitty, and then I continue building upon it subconsciously without necessarily realizing, kind of seeing it in the world, building this whole narrative, and then eventually it turns into some sort of bigger problem. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. I just, the way I think about this is that, and what I was taught is that there was an initial sensitizing event. That's what it was called back in 2006 when I studied this. Initial sensitizing event. I just shortened that to a trauma. There was a trauma. And it may not be that, you know, a kid was being whipped or somebody was being sexually abused, although it could easily be that. But something happened, and that person interpreted that event in a way that created a belief about themselves, about men, about women, about the world, about whatever. And now that fused as this program that resides in their mind. And every so often it gets triggered. And when it gets triggered, it unfolds without conscious input. And so to unwind this, in the way I do things, is I find that initial sensitizing event in their mind. Because in their mind, this is the other thing about the subconscious, its job is to protect you. It has no concept of time. Something that happened 30 years ago is happening right now. Something that happened a day ago is happening right now. And if you put those two factors together, its job is to protect you. It has no concept of time. In my opinion, you have perfectly described PTSD. An IED goes off and a roadside blast. Soldier is there. It's 2005, Middle East, someplace. And now here we are in 2025. Soldiers been out of the military for 15 years, 5,000 miles removed from the blast, 20 years removed from the blast. And still, if a car backfires, or if he sees somebody talking on a cell phone in a furtive way, trigger, program runs. And the program is, you're about to, a bomb is going to go off. Heart starts racing, perspiring, muscles get tense, angry, all designed to protect that person against a threat that doesn't exist in the moment. Because the subconscious has no concept of time. And this is a hard thing for us to get past in our sociological conditioning, in our culture. It's been a year. You're still not over that, Jim?
Yeah.
Or what's the matter with me? That happened when I was a kid.
Yeah.
Well, you just don't understand how the subconscious works. And it's going to keep doing that until and unless you're able to inform and update that program and let the subconscious know this incident is no longer a clear and present danger. Our society wants people to avoid the triggers. We have this thing called trigger warnings. And I'm sure you know this based on the study you've done. You can install a trigger based on anything. When you see the color yellow at a stage hypnosis show or hear the word yellow, you'll quack like a duck. It's the color yellow. I mean, when I stomp my feet 3 times, when I snap my finger 1 time, when you see the first woman you see, you'll think it's your wife. Like, you can set a trigger to anything. The trigger's not the problem. The problem is, what is it attached to? It's attached to a gun. The gun is loaded. The safety is off. So when you pull the trigger, it's going to fire.
Yeah.
You've got it aimed at somebody, you've got a problem. But if the gun's not loaded, if you got a trigger lock on it, or you've got the safety on and you're not pointing it at somebody, you're okay. If the trigger's not the problem, in other words, that's what I'm saying.
So what I hear, and it makes me curious, is are you both getting or weakening the prior triggers as well as creating new triggers, like creating new anchors, creating new things that are like safe places and things like that, mental safe spaces?
Well, to do the work, and think of this from a moment from the perspective of the client, that if what we're doing is going after root cause, because that's the foundation upon which everything else rests, that's producing the results they don't want. And that initial sensitizing event was created by a trauma of some kind. In their mind, they're going to be going to places that the mind is already freaked out about. So before we do that, we have to establish rapport between me and the person with whom I'm working. Once we start the work, we do set up a safe place in their mind, or a sacred space. And that's going to be a mental image in their mind of a place where they're already comfortable. For you, it might be out in the desert. You live in Arizona, you have a truck, you like to take it out in the desert. That might be the place for you. I don't know. For another person, it could be in the mountains with snow. For another person, it could be a beach with the sun, a meadow, a creek, and so on. So I have them go to that place that they already have NLP anchors, emotional anchors attached to that place. I don't have to create them. They're already there. And every time I bring them back to that place, it's just going to strengthen that anchor. And from there, and this is all in the mind, we have them go out, go to that incident that happened when you were, 3 years old. Go to that incident that happened when you found out your wife was cheating on you 3 years ago. And then once we've gathered kind of the what's happening there, and we do what we have to do in that realm, then we come back to this sacred space, and we do more of the healing there. We do more of the neutralizing there until we've eliminated the threat, if you will. until the threat is no longer perceived as a threat by the subconscious mind.
So you take them to the event and they're kind of telling you about the event unfolding. You're getting the story basically. And then you're bringing them back, and then you're kind of doing some integration, talking about what we witnessed, what we experienced essentially there in that space. And
that's
then
right. And
essentially reinterpreting, reframing.
Precisely, because we as human beings are meaning-making machines. Stories. We create stories around everything. Even so-called journalism publishes what they call either articles or stories. They call them stories because it's just somebody's interpretation of what happened. And everybody knows if you have 10 people who witness a motor vehicle accident, you get how many stories about the accident?
Yeah.
You get 10.
Yeah.
So yes, as the story changes, as the interpretation of that event changes, let's just say largely from a threat to a non-threat, the autonomic nervous system can stand down, which is under the control of what? The subconscious mind.
Yep.
So I am constantly, Todd, trying to simplify things for myself with this work, because it can feel sometimes like people come with some serious, complicated issues. And the more I can simplify in my mind the principles, the easier it is to help them do the work, and the faster we get to the result. It's kind of like in the fire service, as a first responder, they're always trying to simplify stuff. They call it, to fireman proof something, to make it so simple that even a fireman can do it. That, like as an EMT, ABC, airway, breathing, circulation. So, you're on a scene, it's nighttime, it's raining, there's lights going, people are screaming, blood, this bad glass broken. And you're like, okay, I'm here with this person. Now what? Because you're could be in a state of heightened anxiety, right? You could be in a sympathetic mode, fight or flight of the autonomic nervous system, because that's human. And you're like, okay, ABC, airway. Do they have an airway? Do they have a patent open airway? Yep. Are they breathing? Yeah. Okay, good. Do they have circulation? And that helps you know, okay, now what do I do? Now what do I do? Now what do I do? Right? So in terms of simplifying things for myself with this work, I've realized that when it comes to, say, a word like anxiety or stress or fear or phobia or worry or freaking out, that it's all describing one of the two modes of the autonomic nervous system. Autonomic just means automatic. Right? It just happens automatically. And that's the fight or flight response. Anger, same thing. Fight or flight response is being activated. Because if you're not in one, you're in the other. And the only other one is rest and digest. But we have all these different words to describe being in the same state. And in terms of context, I have found this fascinating from a long time ago when I used to be an actor, because the number one fear in our country supposedly is the fear of public speaking. And one of the Seinfeld episodes, he had this classic joke, which is, he said, so that means that at a funeral, people would rather be in the coffin than be giving the eulogy.
Yeah.
Because the fear of death was like number 3, and the fear of public speaking is number 1.
And like spiders is 2.
So as an actor or as a public speaker, before you walk out onto the stage, you're going to have sensations inside of your body, right? Your heart probably going to be beating more rapidly. Your stomach may be upset. You might be perspiring a little bit. You're going to have something, more or less, but it's going to be there for 99.9% of the population. And most of the population would interpret those feelings as stress, anxiety, fear, panic, worry. But other people would take those exact same feelings and call it excitement, motivation. Just like they would if you were riding on say, paying to ride on a roller coaster.
Yeah.
You're going to have elevated heartbeat. Your breathing might get shallow. All of the sympathetic response, fight or flight response of the autonomic nervous system, but it gets labeled differently.
Yep.
And because it's labeled differently, people change the story around it. Or maybe the story that they have around it causes it to be labeled differently, which means that they go through it instead of pulling away from it.
Yeah. Yeah, become identified with it even, and it becomes a diagnosis, a lifelong label. Ooh, that becomes, and I have to go back real quick because this is something that's really important to me to get people to understand. So we can kind of touch into the mind-body connection is, the fact that the current stressor doesn't have to be active, doesn't have to be anything right in front of us, doesn't have to be an active trauma going on at the moment for it to be active in our minds. The subconscious mind does not understand time. And so therefore we can be kicking on the autonomic nervous system regularly, the fight or flight regularly. So we can be waking up and stressed almost immediately, checking our phone, comparing ourselves to others, doing all these different things that put us into that mode. And then in that mode, we are weak. Our immune system is down. Our cortisol is up. Inflammation goes up, and inflammation is the precursor to all disease. And so people start to wonder, like, how could my mind possibly lead to a bodily issue? And it's like, well, that's how. And then so someone like Peter here is able to go in and to stop that response from happening in that way, which to me could be as simple as helping someone stop a simple habit to something profound like healing, just depending on how it's showing up in their life, right?
Absolutely. And the way, I told you I've spent 18 years and I still do it, simplifying. And so for me, when it comes to a habit, let's say it's an addiction, cigarette smoking, drug use, alcohol use, gambling, whatever it is, my contention is that's just a symptom. That's your car pulling to the right. That isn't the reason it's pulling to the right. The fact that it is, there's something wrong with the alignment. The tires are misworn or something, right?
Yeah.
So an addiction, I say, is the subconscious mind's attempt to provide temporary relief from pain. Physical pain, emotional pain, psychological pain, spiritual pain, some kind of pain. And while it could even be boredom, because I say boredom is a form of pain. So while the person is doing this thing, eating a candy bar or smoking the cigarette, they get a reprieve from that unpleasant experience. So the solution isn't to fixate on the addiction itself. This is me speaking. Remember, I'm a hypnotist, don't take my advice. The solution is to focus on the underlying pain. When if a person breaks their leg, they're going to have to use crutches. In the beginning, they may even need painkillers. When that leg is healed, they probably won't you probably won't have to convince them to let go of the crutches. You'll be like, this sucks walking around with these crutches. My leg feels great. I don't need these anymore.
Yeah.
And people have described addictions as a crutch before. They are a crutch. They're a crutch for pain that you have that's deeper down. And the solution, again, is not to fixate on the mechanism, what you're doing to relieve yourself temporarily from the pain, but rather to relieve the pain itself.
Yeah.
And once that happens, the alcohol, the cigarettes, the gambling, whatever it is, just fades away.
And so now that makes me curious from the viewer standpoint, as like, okay, there's pain somewhere. Like, let's just say the viewer is accepting that, I'm experiencing pain. There's some sort of deeper pain. Maybe I don't even fully understand it. But like, I don't have Peter, what do I do? How do I kind of tap into my pain, and
right. Like if you can't say afford to work with somebody, or is that what you mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Because I want everybody to. I want people to be open-minded, and this is kind of the point of the show and bringing different practitioners on. But at the same time, I want people to have practical tools at home when they're like, well, that's cool and all, but I don't have access to that guy, And
Right.
so,
Right. Okay. So it's obviously, and I'm a big self-help person. Like I'm a power user of YouTube. Like if I need to learn how to do something around the house or in my car or whatever, or that I'm going to YouTube. I want somebody to tell me how to do it
same.
in the least amount of time possible. And then I'm thrilled that I was able to fix that toilet or whatever it is. So having said that, I guess the point I want to make is that the suggestions I'm going to give are built around that limitation. They're built around the limitation of I can't work with a person who can teach me how to do this or who can walk me through this. Okay. So I have, and you mentioned it at the outset, I've got a YouTube channel, Blue Sky Hypnosis. It's got 200 plus videos on that channel, all kinds of stuff. You can start working with that channel. It's designed for you to do it by yourself at zero cost. Is that as effective as working with somebody? No, but if you read through the comments, you'll read lots of people have had some pretty remarkable results with some of those tracks. I mean, I've got one track right now that's got over 3 million views on weight loss, and thousands of people have had these remarkable results. Other people have had no results. So it's a bit of a crapshoot, but it is a resource. This 200 video library is a resource. One of the videos on there is about a tool called havening. I don't know if you've ever come across this. Havening, Havening, havening. Mm-hmm. And it's sort of like EMDR, rapid eye movement, and sort of like the tapping thing, sort of like that. It's designed to reprocess painful emotional, mental events in your life and neutralize them. And I use this a lot with my clients now. Like I'll combine hypnosis, NLP, havening, talking, like all these different techniques, depending on what I'm dealing with, because havening is so fast. In that video that I have on how to do havening, so you can do it at home, I teach people how to use an ideomotor tool. Have you ever come across that term, Todd?
Yeah.
Okay. So for the audience, an ideomotor tool is basically a very simple mechanism to help you understand what's going on in your subconscious mind. When I was first diagnosed with leukemia and Lyme disease, I worked with a naturopathic physician who used muscle testing. Now, there's a muscle testing that just tests muscle imbalance, and there's a muscle testing kinesiology that uses your muscles to get a yes/no answer to questions. So she would have me hold, a vial of something in my hand up against my chest. I didn't know what was in the vial. And then she would push down on my arm with like one or two fingers and say, resist my pressure. And then I would switch another vial, and I didn't know what was in any of these vials. And every so often I'd feel my arm just go, work. It couldn't hold the pressure of her fingers. And she's like, okay, that was a no. Strong was yes, weak is no. Yeah. That's an ideomotor tool. Well, what I have my clients use is I have them use a pendulum.
Yep.
Right. It can be just a piece of dental floss or string with a ring or a nut or washer tied to the end of it. And what a pendulum does is it moves in a particular way in response to a question that you ask in your mind. Like you could ask the question, am I currently seated in a chair? Am I 900 feet tall? And it will give you a motion for yes, and it'll give you a motion for no. And then you can ask these questions like, am I 900 feet tall? And if I've already established the motion for yes, I've already established the motion for no, I should see the motion for no if it's working properly.
Yeah.
Once I've established that it's working properly, now I can start asking deeper questions. I could ask, are the migraine headaches that I get every week related to a trauma that I suffered earlier in my life? If I get a yes in response to that question, it's like, okay, I've narrowed the field of what's causing these things from everything down to a trauma that happened at a moment in time earlier in my life. Now I could say, if I'm 40 years old, I could say, did this trauma occur before the age of 20? If it's a yes, now, okay, did it happen before 10? No, okay, now I know it's between 10 and 20. I can nail it down to the exact age I was when this happened. And that might fire off my memory and go, oh, that's the year that my parents got divorced. That's the year that I had to start a new school. That's the year I got hit in the head playing baseball. If that doesn't fire off that memory, then you can say, did that trauma happen indoors? Did it happen outside? And let's say it happened indoors. Did it happen at home? No. Did it happen in school? Yes. Did it happen in the classroom? Yes. Did it happen when Johnny punched me in the mouth? Yes. Right? You can get right to, theoretically on your own, you can get right to whatever it was that created this. And then that same video will walk you through how to do the havening to neutralize what happened way back when.
Heck yeah.
So that's the simplest, most direct advice that I can give your listeners as to how they can do this on their own if they don't have access to someone like me.
And do you have any opinion? I do have a couple of things to say about that, but I want to touch on this first. Do you have any opinion about doing your meditations, the guided meditations, first thing in the morning before bed, that sleepy state, the theta state, if we dare call it that?
I think it's way more effective because it's the last thing you do before you go to sleep. I remember my mother saying when I was a kid that if you had a test the next day, it's best to do one more round of studying right before you turn out the light, because then your mind will work on it overnight. And I think she was right. And so that would be kind of what you're talking about. That, yeah, it's a great time to do it. But to not let the perfect be the enemy of the good, because anytime you do it is good.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
And one of the principles of hypnosis is repetition. The more you repeat something, the deeper it drives it into the subconscious mind.
That's picking a time that's better for you is obviously a smarter choice.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. But if you're not able to do it in the morning on Tuesday and you said you were going to do it every day, and the rest of the day gets away from you, go back to it on Wednesday. It's okay that you missed a day. If you miss it in the morning on Tuesday and you can get to it in the afternoon, get to it in the afternoon.
And I've also found it incredibly helpful if you're an overthinker like myself. A lot of self-talk going on. Guided meditation specifically is very helpful. Someone else's words kind of guiding you through what to think, what to do, to breathe, to whatever, to relax. It's very, very nice. I actually prefer guided meditations over just regular for the most part. Like whenever I can.
I have a load of them on my YouTube channel. That's for sure.
Yeah, that's awesome. So I want to go back to this pendulum thing. Okay, very important to me to make this tangible, in the viewer's eyes, because this is something that I was very confused about, very interested in when I first saw. And so there's this idea of, for someone to believe that they could pull up an answer to something 20 years ago would require the belief in the fact that there is no concept of time, and that there is this larger intelligence, that the subconscious mind has this profound memory, right? And so I think that someone would have to accept that first, to be like, hey, there's this huge data bank of stuff that's happened to you that you don't even realize. Everything that you've processed, every central experience you've had your entire life, data bank, subconscious mind is there. And the subconscious mind doesn't communicate through words. It communicates through feelings, through expressions, through different things like that. And so these micro movements, such as the kinesiologic testing, the underlying muscle strength, or the micro movements of a muscle to set the pendulum this way. It's like it feels like you're not even moving it. That's what's
Correct.
so cool about doing it. It's like it feels like you're not moving it.
Right.
And yet it's like, okay, can you give me what would my yes be? And all of a sudden it's like, yeah. And it's trippy. It's trippy. It feels like supernatural, but it's really not. This is how I was taught, at least in my NLP, is there's micro movements, there's these micro muscles that are moving that you don't even realize that the subconscious mind is kind of triggering on behalf and trying to communicate through your own body.
That's right. And the other way to distill it, to take it from the realm of woo-woo, magic, fanciful, perhaps even occult, into practical, is to recognize, your body is always communicating to you. Always. But we live in this culture, again, this 5 sense reality culture, where we're not taught that. We ignore our body. We are surrounded every year by more and more distractions. Like the equivalent of walking into Times Square, with just like all these billboards and lights and noises and sounds and traffic and honking and people. And so we lose awareness of what's happening in our body. And when you go camping, you start to get that back because all that's gone. You're keenly in tune to the changes in the temperature as the sun goes down. The feeling of the fire as you move closer or farther away from it, the smell of the smoke. You're lying on the ground. You're sleeping on the ground, with this tiny little tent between you and the elements. And so in our culture, the only time we're aware of our body and how it's feeling is if we're really, really hungry, if we're really, really sexually turned on, if we're walking down an alley at night and we hear footsteps behind us and we become frightened. If we win the lottery and we're like over the moon excited or something, or we're riding on a roller coaster or watching a horror film, right? That people can feel their bodies then, but that's when the bodies are screaming at them. But even on every subtle little thing, you put an apple to your mouth, you put artificial sweetener to your mouth, your body is speaking to you, but you can't hear it because there's too much noise. And so think of the pendulum as an amplifier of what your body is already doing. It's already giving you those micro movements that you talked about, whether you consciously ask the question or not. Just the actions your body's telling you. And the really amazing thing where this kind of comes together with the history of our culture is that when people have really important decisions to make in their life, the people who love them the most, what do they say? They say, "What does your heart tell you, son? What does your gut tell you, Jennifer? Why don't you sleep on it?" And what does that mean? Ask your body.
Yeah.
Let your mind, your conscious mind, become unconscious while you're sleeping, so that in the morning, your subconscious will deliver the answer to you. We already know this, but we haven't put these pieces together.
Dude, yeah. And that actually leads me to something I was going to ask you about with have you heard of Edison and his naps?
Yes. We learned about that in hypnotherapy school.
Yeah, it's like such a cool concept that Thomas Edison used to take these naps. He used to try to get himself into this, sleepy state and knew that profound ideas would come to him. And there's many stories of major writers, would do the same thing. It's like whenever you get stuck, my subconscious mind will continue working on it. I'm just going to put it off to the side and kind of let that happen. And it's just such a cool thing for people to really understand that there is a power there that they can use. But generally, as you said, when you head out into the world, it's being used against us often, and so that's this idea that, something that I've kept myself aware of and that you could potentially touch on is the fact that every impression becomes an expression. So every subconscious mind's impression becomes an expression. How would you describe that?
I've never heard that before, but I like it. And it's kind of like the quality of your output depends on the quality of the input. Yeah. And it's also said as sort of garbage in, garbage out, or look not too long into the abyss because the abyss is looking back into you.
Nietzsche. Yes.
Yeah. And there's, when I work with people who, and it's so rampant, I'd say pretty much every client I work with has an anxiety issue. And a number of those people, not a huge number, but a significant enough, I find out are devotees of horror films.
Dude, yes, I'm so glad you mentioned that.
what's going in, what are they ingesting? What are they consuming and ingesting through their eyes and their ears that is essentially garbage that's designed to produce anxiety?
Yep.
That then they have to mentally and emotionally and maybe even spiritually digest that material.
Yep.
Maybe while they're sleeping. And now they're having nightmares, and now they're under stress and they don't really know why. Well, you've been feeding yourself the equivalent of Twinkies and wondering why you got diabetes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Seriously. But
That's
they're not
exactly.
putting those two things together, because in our culture, those two things don't go together.
Yes.
We pretend that this is different. This is separate. Oh, that's over there. That has nothing to do with this.
Yep.
But everything is connected to everything else. That's like, and I'm not going to say I'm a quantum physicist or an expert or anything, but what little I know is like, what is it that in one atom, everything in the universe exists in one atom, every element or something? There's like the pattern of the code just repeats itself everywhere.
I can 100% see that.
And we know in our culture that what you feed yourself in terms of food and alcohol and drinks and chemicals, stuff you put on your skin, fewer people know that, but that's starting to get out there, will affect how your body functions. Well, what about goes into your mind?
Yeah, that's exactly what I mean. So like by the expressions, like, the subconscious mind expresses itself in certain ways through these feelings, through images it sends to you, through they can become beliefs, because you have a strong feeling attached to then an idea. And so it's like, I have a belief that maybe I'm not safe. Maybe there's killers out there. I have a feeling of anxiety. I have an image in my mind of being stabbed or whatever it is. And so those are expressions based upon a subconscious impression. You impressed upon your mind something, you put in something, and now that there can't be anything else that happens from that. So it has to be expressed some way. It has to come out some way or another, essentially.
Right. And what we hope is that it's digested the way you digest that Twinkie. Hopefully your liver and your other
filters,
your other organs can take care of it and then expel it and get rid of it so that it doesn't cause any other problems. But it could if you did too much of that, or if you ingested some kind of poison.
Yeah. So
it's definitely the same with what we take in through our eyes and our ears.
So on a similar note, I feel like this transitions well, is I wanted to talk about how we can make things that are uncomfortable more comfortable. So flipping it on its head through visualization, through mental rehearsal, kind of how that works through the mind, how, we would kind of be reluctant to move towards things that are uncomfortable, and how we can kind of overcome that.
Okay. So give me an example.
So like, let's say money. Let's say like, I'm not really that comfortable with money, or not really comfortable with public speaking. So let's just take public speaking, for example. I'm not comfortable with public speaking. And so I can make the uncomfortable comfortable by repeating it, repetition in my head. Now I do it. I've done it successfully, so maybe it can be through affirmations. Hey, I speak and people like to hear what I have to say. You can do it through imagery, through mental rehearsal, through the idea of, imagining yourself successfully doing it, or imagining even post event is like, oh, everyone's clapping for me. Everyone loved it. It went really well, so that it becomes,
I got you.
Felt uncomfortable, now becomes comfortable.
So I'm going to say that to most effectively solve that problem and to help people get from where they've been to where they want to be, we have to think of a coin and think there's two sides to the coin. One side is the dark side. One side is what's pulling you back in the direction you don't want to go in. And the other side is the seeds for the new and healthy plants that are going to grow and produce this beautiful fruit, right? Both sides. And I'd like you to think about a sailing ship for a minute, and think about how if the hull of the sailing ship is solid and streamlined and it's been cleaned of barnacles, then it has kind of, to our mind, maybe a couple other big simple features. One is the sail, right? That's going to provide the power for this boat to move through the water and go anywhere in the world that the captain wants it to go. But it has another element to it as well, which is it has an anchor that's designed to keep it in the same place. You throw the anchor overboard when you're in harbor, and that thing isn't going to drift away. It's not going to drift into rocks. You're going to be safe to be right there with the anchor deployed. Well, if you want to sail someplace and you get the sails up and there's plenty of wind and it's blowing beautifully, but you're not going where you want to go, why? You haven't pulled up the anchor. That's dragging across the seabed, and it's going to retard your ability to get to your goal. So if you have an existential fear from an old trauma that relates to public speaking, and you don't deal with that and you just do the positive side, my opinion, it's just my opinion, is that you are fighting against yourself, because part of you is trying to keep you safe by keeping you out of that lectern, off the microphone, off the stage. Well, another part of you is like, no, here's more fuel. You're a really good speaker. People love to hear what you have to say. Right?
Yeah.
So I say you have to do both. That's my personal way of dealing with this. And this will help. This will be a very, I think, a powerful or graphic example of how that dark side of the coin could prevent somebody, despite a whole bunch of affirmations, from achieving their goal. So in the 18 years I've been doing this, I've had a handful of people with public speaking issues who, when we go to the root of the problem, it goes to a past lifetime.
Yeah, I'm glad we went here. Jeez.
In the past lifetime, they found themselves on a wooden stage, surrounded by people looking up at them. But on this stage, there was a guillotine.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
And
so in their subconscious mind, when they got up on a stage in front of a bunch of people, it fires off, oh my God, it's happening again. You have got to get out of here. And the person's going, I don't know why, but I break out in these sweats. I feel like I'm in a state of panic and anxiety. And all I have to do is just read from this thing and talk to the people. Well, in the subconscious, there's a bigger backstory.
Jeez.
So I'm not saying that for everyone with public speaking, they were executed in a past lifetime. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that for me, when I work with people, I want to look at both sides.
Yeah.
Both sides of that coin. And I'm not trying to say that if you do Toastmasters and you use exposure therapy and you just keep doing it over and over again, you couldn't break through, because there are people that do that. I'm just saying the way I work. I find it way, way more efficient to get rid of anything that's blocking you.
Yeah.
And lift up that other part of you. And when I do that, what I like to do in the mental imagery in hypnosis is I like to have them go to the end of their presentation when everyone's clapping. They're done. And then move back in time, then move to the middle of the presentation. Everything is going really well, and they feel like they're in the moment. They feel like they're serving. They feel like they're making a difference. They can see people smiling at them and nodding their heads in the audience, and then go to the beginning, and then go to getting ready, and then going to the night before, and then starting at the night before, getting ready, the morning, going there, and then go chronologically through it. Because the mind, as you probably already know, is really good with, if you say, I've already, whatever it is, whatever your goal is, that's already happened, and you totally identify with it, it's pretty good at figuring out how to get you there. And if you start at the end, it doesn't give the person an opportunity to immediately feel anxiety just because they're getting ready to speak.
Yeah.
Right? You're backing up from the good stuff where it's already gone well. And you're telling the subconscious mind it's already gone well. It has no concept of time. So when you mentally rehearse, by the time you get up on the quote unquote real stage, you already done it a number of times.
That's crazy. So we have to go back to this past life regression thing, because again, as a logical person, it's something that I personally, through my readings, have come to believe. And I'm open to say that. But I know not everyone does, and so it's like, how do you first kind of come upon a past life regression? How do you, as a normal individual who's maybe never heard of that, get thrust into a world where that's normal now?
You mean, how did I find my way to that?
Mm-hmm.
It's very hard for me to say, because I think the simplest way to answer the question would be, oh, it happened when I was in Santa Fe and we were talking about these things. We were talking about present life regression because we did that all the time. And I was in a different state because fear and how I dealt with it caused me to start going towards things that I was afraid of. It caused me to be more open than I was before, because I knew, I think on some level, that what got me there to that place of diagnosis and sickness wasn't going to get me to the place of health and healing. It's going to have to be something different. And then the bigger answer, I guess, is that in retrospect, I think I had some kind of fascination with that concept, even though I didn't know why I had a fascination with that concept. Like, one of my favorite movies of all time is this very low budget film that was made in 1980 with Christopher Reeve and Jane Seymour called Somewhere in Time, where this guy sees a picture of a woman, a black and white picture of a woman, an actress from like the 1800s, and he's living in the 1980s, and he just can't stop looking at this picture, and he comes to believe that he met her and knew her in an earlier life. And he starts trying to figure out how he can go back to her, how he can find her again, and ends up using like hypnosis and some other techniques. And so I remember as an 18-year-old in 1980 being absolutely blown away by this film, like just so captivated by it. So I'm quite sure that the seeds were already in there somewhere.
Yeah.
And then when I had this crisis and I was willing to look under all these different stones for the answer, I think those things kind of came together in a sort of natural way, because doing a present life regression to the practitioner is really the same as doing a past life regression. The skills are exactly the same. There's really no difference. And I began reading about it. Like, Brian Weiss is this famous psychiatrist, Yale-trained psychiatrist who had a very, standard, august practice. And he had this one client, and he'd been working with her for 2 or 3 years and had made no progress whatsoever. And one day he thought, well, maybe I'll try past life regression. And she just, boom, she goes into a life in ancient Greece. And long and short of it is she doesn't have the problem anymore. And he's like blown away by this. And he ended up writing a book called Many Lives, Many Masters. And a lot of people find me because they read that book. And now they're like, oh my God, this makes so much sense. And
that's crazy.
Yeah.
Have you heard of Michael Singer?
Yeah, I have. I haven't read his books, but I've heard of him.
Yeah, I haven't read them entirely, but dude, it's like, yeah, that kind of stuff is just so incredibly interesting. He calls it the life between lives. So he takes people to it's a life between lives regression. At some point you existed in a spiritual world or spiritual capacity, if you will. And, before you ever came to this earth. Yeah, I love it. I love it. Like, it's mind-boggling to me.
I do that work too. That was originally based on the work of Michael Newton, who's another person who was a psychologist. He wrote a bunch of books about this. He devoted his whole career to life between lives, or LBL.
Oh, that's what I meant. I said Michael Singer. Yeah. Michael Newton. Yes, exactly.
Michael Newton. Yeah. Yep. Journey of Souls and other titles very similar to that.
Yeah. Yeah. And for a logical person, again, that's a book where he did thousands of regressions. And you can imagine doing a regression on someone. He said he was a skeptical guy too. I watched like a little interview of him talking. He talked about how like he did it with one person, took them there. They basically set the scene, hey, what are you seeing? What are you feeling? What do you, and then have another person who's never met that person before describe, their life between the lives, describe the exact same thing. And then happen over and over. Like, I couldn't imagine that, man. Like, what you guys are doing is peeping into realities that are
in a way,
world.
In a way. Yeah.
Yeah.
The first one I did was with my son, my eldest son, when he was 8. And I don't really work one-on-one with other people's children unless they're like 16, 17, like I don't think there's anything wrong with it. I just take extra care when it comes to children. But with my own kid, I had no worry about it at all. And in the Life Between Lives session I did with him, and this is the first one I ever did it at home. And he's on a hunting party, like a Native American on a hunting party. And he's a youth, maybe he's like 13 or something. And he describes the weapons that they have and the other warriors, and they've killed a bear. And he's talking about this guilt that he feels about killing the bear. And I said, when I snap my fingers, the bear will be here and you can communicate with the bear. 3, 2, 1, boom. And is the bear there? Yep. And I said, apologize to him. Tell the bear that you're sorry for killing him. So he does that. And I said, does the bear answer you? And he said, yeah. And I said, what did he say? When life is given for life, a higher purpose is achieved. This comes out of the mouth of an 8-year-old child.
Jeez. That's like goosebumps, yeah.
Yeah. When life is given for life, a higher purpose is achieved.
Jeez.
8 years old.
Yeah, dude, I have a 10-year-old, so I know how profound that's.
And he wasn't walking around saying stuff like that all the time. This was just, it felt like it literally came from the divine.
That's absurd. Jeez. Man, I love that. So do you feel like, do people come to you specifically for that? Do you feel like that's just where your sessions lead you automatically? I'm not sure exactly how that works. Like, do you decide to do that, or like I said, is that just something that's like, hey, let's test this out. Let's try out this tool. Like, how do you kind of decide which things you're doing with people?
So people generally come to me. I mean, sometimes they come because they're interested in past life regression, or they're interested in life between lives. And those, as you just said, are tools. What they ultimately care about is they don't want to have something that's been happening happen anymore. Or they want some outcome that has been eluding them. Right? That's what they want. And I think of it as like back to the simplification thing, like if a contractor, you want a deck on the back of your house. Why do you want the deck? Because you want to invite your friends and family over, and you can imagine in your mind having that picnic on the 4th of July, and you're sitting on this deck and you're looking out over your backyard, whatever it is. You've got this emotional connection to that deck. You don't care what tools I use. You just want the deck.
Yeah.
Because you really want the experiences of having the deck.
Yeah.
And I see it the same way. I see that a past life regression is like a circular saw. A life between lives is like a power drill. Like they can help you create something else that is actually of importance to someone. And so I wouldn't just willy-nilly take someone into a past lifetime unless I already knew, based upon the work that we do first, whether there was a trauma there that needs to be repaired. Or if there's a skill there that they need to access so they can feel what it's like again to be able to speak confidently on stage. Because you can do that. You can regress somebody to a lifetime where they were able to do that. And when you have them in that moment, now you start using the NLP aspects, which is what color is associated with it? Anchor the color. How's your body standing? Oh, I'm standing up tall. What's your chest? My chest is open. My voice feels strong. I'm making eye contact with people one at a time. Great. Boo, boo. Fuse that in. So that when you're in that situation again, now it's like, I know how to do this. I stand up tall. I see the color, light green in my mind. I look at people in the eye one by one.
That's powerful.
That's how I would employ the tool, is in service of something else. And that's all based on, let's call it, it's a highfalutin term when you think of a pendulum, but it's kind of, it's like a diagnostic. It helps guide us as to what you need, what the acuity of it is. We do the work, and then we go test it again. Did we get it? Fully, partially, not at all.
So then I'm curious, and this may be a hard question to answer then, but do you think that there's a big difference in the way that you use the tools now versus the way you used to use the tools as a more of a beginner in your first couple of years of practice, that you can really think of that's like, hey, now I do a lot of this versus a lot of that, or now I skip this, and you know what I mean? Like any sort of nuance that's changed?
I do. And the school basically gives you a framework, and everybody kind of starts with the framework. And over time, if you keep doing it, I think you find faster, more efficient ways of getting the result. That's been my experience. I'm always looking for greater efficiency, faster. So for example, what I've learned is that with havening, I can solve a trauma faster than I can with other tools. And that I can use the havening as a hypnotic induction, take them right into a regression. I don't have to do a formal hypnotic induction. I can just go right there, which saves time and makes it more efficient. I can use the pendulum, which I didn't learn about the pendulum in my hypnosis training, but I've learned how to incorporate that into this work to make things faster and more accurate. So I would say, if anything, that's what it is. I a long time ago, I started combining past life and life between lives, in that I want a person connected to their spiritual guidance when they're in that sacred space. Already, when you do that, you have entered the life between lives. And to rely on that spiritual guidance to validate what we got with the pendulum. And to validate the solution. Do I have your permission to go into that past lifetime? If we get a no, we're not going. What is it that you want them to, do you want them to do something else instead? Yeah. Take us there. And then they'll take us there. They'll take us to they're forgiving somebody, on the playground. Come back. Did they learn what they needed to learn? Yep. Can we go to the past life? Yep. Client, you ready to go? Because sometimes they came to go there, but now they're saying no. They don't know why. If they answer yes, then we go. So it's about streamlining. It's about helping to simplify, to be able to explain things to people in a way that makes sense to them so that they feel confident and comfortable moving forward. I mean, a lot of it, honestly, is for people to learn how to trust themselves. Because in our culture, again, we actually denigrate the non-physical. So if I asked you, what do you think the most important and powerful characteristic of a human is? What would you say it is? Just out of curiosity.
Adaptation.
Adaptation. Okay. And what is it? What characteristic is it, would you say, that allows us to adapt to changing circumstances and situations? What allows us to do that? What is that thing called that we possess that allows us to adapt? Like if you think about being able to develop a spear would be an adaptation, right?
Yeah.
Because it's way more efficient at bringing down a woolly mammoth than a club. So what is it that allowed, and sorry to put you on the spot, that would allow cavemen to come up with a spear when one didn't exist before?
Forethought.
Okay, close. I would say imagination.
Okay, yeah, I like that too, yeah.
The ability to conceive of something that does not yet exist on the physical plane. Like the ability to see it in your mind or imagine it in your mind gives us as humans the power to bring that into physical existence. That's kind of like magic.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so I'm going to say imagination is the most powerful resource, the most powerful capability that human beings possess. It's certainly not our physical senses, because you compare those to certain animals and we're blown away.
Yeah.
You and I see 0.0035% of the light spectrum.
Jeez.
And our culture says seeing is believing.
Yeah.
And our culture says it's all in your head. It was just a dream. It's only your imagination. It actively denigrates our most powerful attribute. So that people walk around thinking, oh, am I just making this up?
Yeah.
Well, didn't Edison make up the light bulb?
Yeah.
Didn't German scientists make up the jet engine? Didn't Einstein and others make up the atomic bomb? You know, and so on and so on. Automobiles, cell phones, MRI machines. It goes on and on. It all came out of a human being's imagination. They conjured it from the ether and then turned it into a physical reality. And our culture trains people to ignore that very part of themselves. So a big part of my job is helping them learn how to trust themselves, because that's where it's coming from. And I would guess, you know, you told that anecdote of the first time you were working with somebody on hypnosis or whatever it was, and or NLP, and they're like, well, what is it? Where are you? What are you seeing? And you're like, I don't know what I'm seeing. I'm seeing nothing.
Yeah.
But part of that is because as a logical guy, you probably shut down that part of you. You could call it the right hemisphere of your brain if you believe in that left-right hemisphere thing, which I don't know if it's true or not, but concept.
Yeah, partially true. Yeah.
So maybe you're like, oh, because you learned that, maybe like I did, that to be a man, you're supposed to be tough, be able to control yourself, don't complain, you know, be logical, be emotions under control and all that other stuff. And so you shut down the other part where, you know, a lot of women, they learn something different. And so they're allowed to have a woman's intuition. They're allowed to imagine things.
I agree. Yeah.
And why do people on ayahuasca or psilocybin or some of these other hallucinogenics, why do they have these trips? Why are they like, they get these insights into their life and they can see something horrible happening when they were a little kid with their father? It's because it's already there.
Yeah.
This compound, this is just my theory, suppresses that other part that's like, that's not real. You're making it up. It's all in your head. It's just a dream. It's only your imagination. And it keeps that squashed down. And then you go to sleep at night, and what happens? It comes back up again.
Yeah.
I firmly believe that those hallucinogenics have a place. And I think they have a place for the Western mind that is so held back. It's so confined. It's so prescribed that people prevent themselves from accessing this enormously powerful part of themselves, either through ignorance, they just don't know about it, they've never been taught, or through like, well, you're crazy, you know, if you can fill in the blank.
Yeah.
Which I'm sorry to ramble here, but there's one other thing that I just think is hysterical. And that is, somebody said once that it's the most natural thing in the world for people to say, in answer to the question, hey, what did you do on Sunday? Well, I went to church. It's totally normal. It's totally normal to have multiple churches in your town. It's totally normal to pray. And prayer is what? Prayer is like communicating to God, but it's a one-way communication generally, right? You ask God, please help my relative who's sick, please forgive me for what I did, something like that, right?
Yeah.
And it's all awesome. I'm not knocking it at all. But if you said on Sunday when I was praying to God, God told me, most people would think you were out of your mind.
Yeah.
So it's acceptable to have one-way communication to God, but if God talks back, now you're considered insane.
Yeah.
Doesn't that tell us a lot about the creative potential of our mind and how it's been tamped down?
100%.
And if you had a huge problem, wouldn't you want that very ability of creativity that leads to adaptation to be working for you?
Absolutely. See, and this made me curious about you and your own kid now. So I don't know how old your kid is now. Older gentleman.
27.
27. So you growing up, knowing all these things, how would you say that it changed the way that you parent or that believe in like development?
It's a phenomenal question. I love it. And we could do a whole show on just that. But it's starting with what they said to me before I went out there, which is whether you choose to practice this or not, it's going to transform your life. And I said, when I went out there, I realized I had this anger thing. It really came out with them when, one of them would pick on the other one or whatever. And when I came back, it was gone. So already as a father, it's night and day. Being raised by an angry dad versus being raised by a dad who is calmer, calmer and can handle things calmly is totally different. So right there. And then the second thing, I suppose, would be just this kind of natural way of thinking about these concepts for them, being exposed to these concepts, not being indoctrinated by them, not like every day we're doing stuff, but just here and there. And then they'd hear stories, and we had a deeper appreciation for what we were exposing them to. And it wasn't because of hypnosis. We had made the decision prior, but we decided when my eldest was born that we were not going to have a TV in the house.
Nice.
We didn't want them feeding on that. We didn't want them being programmed by that at the most impressionable ages, because they are.
Right.
0 to 7, 0 to 9 are the most impressionable ages. So these are some of the I hope, answers that get to your question.
Yeah, and I also can assume, with my own son, like I'm glad. So I'm really glad you brought this up about imagination. Like we talk about how powerful it is all the time. We talk about how great it is that he had a great idea. We talk about what is your body telling you, what is the feeling you're getting. Like trying to become aware of all those things. And that's something that is, like you said, tamped down by society. But in this house, it's not. And I would assume in your house, it's not. It's like those intuition is respected, and you're allowing them to like really kind of like build that relationship and build the trust with themselves, as you said.
100%. And our kids are all practical kids. They can all shoot guns. They can all operate tractors. They can all drive manual transmission vehicles.
Nice.
2 of them can do welding. Like they can repair cars. They can do all kinds of practical things. But they have this other side to them as well that I wouldn't take all the credit for it by any stretch, but it created an openness in me to, with my wife, we had decided to send them to, primarily because of my wife, to send them to a Waldorf school, which their theory is hand, heart, and head, as opposed to head.
Yep. Yeah. Dude, I'm huge into Rudolf Steiner and that whole.
Yeah, exactly. And
I love it.
We know from the hard sciences that crossing the midline is really good for your brain. Like when you walk and your arms are swinging and your legs are going, it's like really good for your brain. And when you learn how to say knit or sew or something, it's actually helping your brain.
Yep.
That music is really good for math, and math is really good for music. So that education helped them on all of those different levels. No TV in the house helped them. A dad who wasn't angry helped them. Being aware of what we were reading to them. When my eldest son was being a bully to my daughter when he was little, I just went into his room at night, while he was sleeping, sat down next to him, and for like 5 minutes, I just gave him suggestions. You love your sister. You feel a need to be kind to her and to protect her and to be loving to her. It feels really good to you to do those things and to be respectful of her. And it's so much fun, and it gives you that feeling of being a really good big brother. All while he's sleeping. So only his subconscious mind is taking it in. And the next morning I would watch as his behavior changed, and he was being kind to her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's so crazy, man. Like, the idea of, the connecting midlines and right and left brain, dude. So I got Einstein right here, as you can see. And so I don't know if you know this already, but if the viewers don't, it's like there was one thing about Einstein's brain that was different than other people's, and they wanted to figure out what it was. Obviously, like, this guy's incredibly smart. His brain's got to be bigger. His brain's got to be whatever, and they found out that the biggest difference was the corpus callosum, the connection, the bridge between the right and left hemisphere was very, very well synced. And he talked about playing violin as a way of getting ideas. He talked about laying in a lake in a boat. I guess people got used to it wherever he lived, because at first they thought he was like dead or injured or something, but he'd like lay flat in his boat and just like in the middle of the lake and just think. And so he just like did all these things to develop. He knew the creative, the imagination. There's quotes about imagination being the most important thing to him and all these different things. And so like when you tie that together with like his math ability and his crazy analytical mind, then you get that melding. And so to me, I'm always working on my kid with that same thing. Like he's great at math. He's analytical. He actually has autism. So he's even more analytical than, a normal person. And then we're working on like, okay, getting in touch with your feelings and using your imagination and all these different things that I know in my mind are going to develop that other side of his brain.
Wow, that's so cool. My wife is really taken by a podcast series she's listening to now. And it's called the telepathy tapes, where they look at, I think, children with autism who have this enhanced ability to communicate telepathically. And I think these children are probably far less functioning than your son is. Like they're really significant with the autism, but then they have this ability to communicate telepathically. And she's been telling me about it, and it's just fascinating to consider.
Without that conscious mind creating all those constructs, then there's not really that barrier there to the unconscious mind. That's kind of what the whole purpose here is. And so it's like, that's why I asked you, is like, if you can raise a kid in an environment in which they don't develop a bunch of these constructs that are limiting, they don't develop incorrect beliefs and negative thought patterns and things, then who might they become? It's a very powerful thought to think about,
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So I'm curious about identity shift. I kind of wanted to bring this up. I feel like we've kind of touched on it a little bit, but like anybody who is focusing on just creating a new identity, focusing on moving into, moving from one cure to another, developing and kind of letting go of who they always have been and develop, even if it's like someone who has been really sharp. This is another thing I is really important for someone who's been really sharp and intense with like their relationship, has been kind of angry, like you said, like they come back and like it feels like weird to be the new self, and so it's like, how do they kind of move into a identity shift and support themselves during identity shift with the understanding of the subconscious mind, if you will?
I would say from my own experience, again, in terms of simplification, the analogy that I made was, I made a couple, but the one that it turned into was, if you want to remodel your kitchen, the first step is demolition. And if you didn't know already that the contractor was going to come in and do that first, you might panic. Frank goes, wait a second. I could at least fry eggs before, and I could wash a couple dishes. Now the place is a fucking mess. What have you done?
Yeah.
It's a catastrophe. It's worse than it was before. Well, yeah.
Crazy, yeah.
Because we have to take that down and clean it all out before we can start building it back up. So for me, there was a period of, I said that it was like the supports of my Potemkin village had been kicked out. Potemkin village, for those who haven't heard this obscure term, is what they created in Russia before the Russian Revolution, when they wanted the emperor to come through town and make the town look super prosperous. It's basically like a Hollywood set. You just have the facade of buildings.
Okay. Yeah.
And behind it, if you walk around back, there's just like a 2x4 holding up the facade. It's not a building. That's a Potemkin village. So I said the Potemkin village of my life, that I have kicked out the supports of that. And it felt really uncomfortable, because at least before I had that, I could pretend that I had it all together. I could pretend that I wasn't, afraid of this and worried about that. I could put on a show. And as I was moving through this process, it felt like I got rid of that part. And that felt really uncomfortable before I started to build up the new part. So I think, in terms of advice, I guess I would say to people, have faith. Have faith that you're on the right path. and keep going. With whatever it is, going to the gym, you're not getting the results, keep going. Have faith. It's going to be okay.
And I love what you mentioned there, because what I heard from that was ownership. What I heard from that was, hey, let's let go of the facade. It's okay to not be okay.
Yes.
Let's just move forward with where you're at, because the sooner you can let go of that, the sooner you can start to establish,
Exactly. And the other thing I would like to say is that your car could sound like it was on its last legs. Like it was about ready to go. Engines going bang, 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 bang down the street, and it's spewing smoke and everything. And it turns out that it's a bad spark plug. They put the new spark plug in, and now that fourth cylinder or the sixth cylinder starts firing, and everything, it's purring like a kitten. And it's great again. It doesn't mean, like, if something's not going right in your life, in your health, in your relationship, in your finances, it doesn't mean that you need a total overhaul. It doesn't mean everything is wrong. It doesn't mean you got to throw away your wife or throw away your husband. There could be one or two things going on that, like that spark plug, is creating the illusion of a catastrophe. And recognize that probably 90+% of who you are is perfect as it is. You don't put your finger in light sockets. You don't walk out into traffic without looking both ways. Like, you got this far. You had to be doing a lot right just to get this far.
Yeah.
So it might be one limiting belief, one or two, like it could be a couple of things. And because preservation of your physical existence is so important to your subconscious mind, thank you, subconscious mind, right? Because it keeps us alive. Because that agenda is so important to your subconscious mind, it can prioritize that over other things. And I guess this is a good time to comment on the word sabotage. We were talking about that earlier. People use this all the time. I keep sabotaging myself. I would like people to consider the proposition that it's not sabotage, that it's actually a protective impulse. The part of you is trying to protect you by not letting you speak up on that stage because it thinks you're going to get executed.
Yeah.
For example, right? It's not doing it because it doesn't want you to advance in your career. It just thinks it's dangerous for you to get on that plane. It's dangerous for you to be in this relationship. So it has a beneficial impulse. It's just out of date.
Yeah, the mechanism is working.
Correct. Because maybe whatever that thing is, let's say the anger, right? I sabotage my relationships with anger. Okay, on the surface, I get that. Who wants to be around an angry person?
Yeah.
Right? You could sabotage your relationships. But the purpose of anger is it's a defensive response against the perception that something of value has been or will be taken from you. Could be your pride, could be your money, could be your life, could be a number of things. In that moment, when you get angry, like I did with my kids, that's what was going on in my subconscious mind. Was there really a danger? No, there wasn't. But there was part of me that was behaving that way as a protective mechanism. And like a little child who's trying to help mommy in the kitchen or something and gets food all over the floor, you don't come in and scream at them. You're like, oh, you were trying to help.
Yeah.
Sweet. Let me show you how to do it the right way. Yeah?
Yeah.
Same thing with our subconscious. It's not the enemy. Even if it's quote unquote sabotaging you, because that's not how it views it. It views it as trying to protect you.
Dude, that's powerful.
So if we can work with these parts of us and not say, I've got to kill that part of me. I got to get rid of that part. No more than you would say that about your small child who just made a mess in the kitchen. No, you want to educate. You want to help that part feel safe. Like that old thing, that old IED blast, that's in the past. That's gone. It's finished. It's done. You're safe. We can move forward now.
Yeah. Dude, and I love like you said, so In my NLP course, they described the subconscious mind as a child with superpowers. So it's
Yeah,
like it's a very, very realistic. So it's like they're going to take what you say very literally. You know how you give a child directions and you're like, oh, Jesus Christ, okay, I see where you went wrong, but that's not what I meant. You know what I mean? Or the genie. You like the
yeah.
same thing with the
Secret
genie. It's
talk
like
about the genie. Yeah.
you tell the genie, your wish, and it's like, what the hell? That's not what I meant. Like, and it's like it meant well. Sure, maybe it meant well.
Oh, and that's why
Subconscious mind means well.
if you've probably heard of that book, The Four Agreements.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah. And one of the agreements is to be impeccable with your word. Well, from the standpoint of a hypnotist, that makes perfect sense because that genie, that child with superhuman powers, that's totally literal, that can deliver anything you want, is listening all the time. And it's not going to distinguish the nuance of your sarcasm.
Yep.
Or the things that you just habitually say that are actually undermining you. Like people who say that they're not lucky.
Yep.
People who call themselves stupid or call themselves ugly or call themselves fat or call themselves whatever, unworthy or whatever it is. This will never happen for that person, they say. Like that powerful part of you, like a 3-year-old, is listening to everything you say, and she believes everything you say, and she starts to behave as though that's the truth. And these things that you say, you've probably been saying them your whole life because you heard a caregiver saying them or whatever.
Yeah.
And it's not just a funny toss, throw it away. No, it's real. That's a huge breakthrough for people when they can begin to understand that, because they are their own greatest hypnotist. They are hypnotizing themselves every single day. They're giving themselves hypnotic suggestions every single day, consciously and unconsciously.
Yeah. I say there's an ad campaign going on in your mind at all times.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah. Whether you're, giving yourself positive, good ads or not,
Yep.
And so this is, I guess, before we touch on the last topic here, I want to go into this idea of like, breaking down the old. And so the idea of, the fact that this could be a simple shift, and where psychoanalysis, and seeing a psychiatrist and psychologist is years of unpacking what happened, if you will, And so, I know how much different hypnotherapy, is and NLP is than traditional psychotherapy. But if there's a way that you could help people understand the fact that it can be such a simple shift, it doesn't have to be like you go back and you re-experience the whole thing again. And like how to, I guess, just kind of re-summarize, I guess, how simple it can be, even though it's not that simple because they can't necessarily do it themselves. They don't have the skills, but yeah, you see what I'm getting at?
I do. I mean, so I'll go back to EMT training. So the first step for an EMT when they arrive on a scene is to do a rapid assessment of the patient. And the rapid assessment, let's say there's somebody lying next to a car accident, and then lying on the side of the road, and they're like unconscious or moaning or something. And they've got obvious wounds like to their arm and maybe another obvious wound to their leg. The temptation is to immediately begin treating those wounds. But what you don't know is, do they have a big piece of glass sticking out of their back that may kill them if you don't deal with that immediately? And so you're supposed to rapidly assess them. You're supposed to look at them, head to toe, airway, breathing, circulation, do all that stuff before you start taking action. So it's assessment, and then you take the action, and then you transport them. Well, and again, a total disclaimer, I'm a hypnotist. Don't take my word for it. Take this, decide for yourself what it means. But in my way of thinking about this, traditional psychotherapy does the first part. They do the assessment. They figure out what's going on and maybe where it originated from. And then they keep talking about that. But they don't move to the second part, which is now take some action. Remediate this. Because up until recently, with EMDR, they haven't had any tools to actually make a change. And talking about it there is value there. There's value in being able to identify why I'm angry. But then you got to do something about it.
Yeah.
And the key to fixing the problem does not reside in the conscious mind, because the conscious mind ain't creating the problem. It's created by the subconscious mind because it thinks you're in danger. You've got to do the work there. But this is where historically the field of psychology has eschewed hypnosis and NLP and havening. And only now they're sort of beginning to scratch the surface by some of those practitioners, small number, doing EMDR, because that's a way to reprocess the subconscious mind. By some of those practitioners going, you know what? I've just noticed so many people losing their PTSD when they did psilocybin. Maybe we should do a study on it.
Yeah.
Yeah, you think?
Yeah, that's so. Richard Bandler, the creator of NLP, said that he read all the books in a psychiatrist's home that he could get his hands on. He's an avid reader, and that he didn't find a single, thing to do about any of them. It's like, okay, I understand them. We can analyze them, we can diagnose them, and other than medication, what do we do about them?
Yep.
And so it's kind of funny that I was talking to another guy, Wilton Atkins, on my show, and he talked about how like EMDR is essentially an NLP technique, the movie theater technique, from NLP, which is so funny that NLP would be pseudoscience, and then all of a sudden we get science on a NLP technique, and then we switch the name, called EMDR, and then say it's a a psychological tool, whatever.
Yeah, that's how the system works. That wants to maintain and grow its power. That's par for the course. But you're not going to get. I can't remember who was saying this. I don't know if it was Jordan Peterson or somebody like that. They were saying that innovation cannot come from established organs. It can't come from an established corporation, really. It can't come from the government. It's going to come from somebody in their basement or in their garage. Someone who doesn't have any limitations, on developing some new technique or tool or technology.
Yeah.
Because the established system has policies and procedures and ways of doing things, and it's got pecking orders and people who are protecting their little fiefdoms. And that's kind of anti-adaptation. That's anti-creativity. So it makes sense to me that these kind of fringe, if you want to call it that, offshoots, the parts of our culture that have not been accepted, are the ones where things are happening more rapidly. It's the same with the psychedelics.
Yep.
Once institution gets into that, then that will be the entrenched thing of it. That's the only way to treat this. Even if something better comes along from the outside, they go, that's pseudoscience. We have the real science. We thought this was pseudoscience before, but we're not going to mention that.
Yeah.
So, I want to come back to another thing that you said in your question, which was that people don't have to go back into the incident. I want to say that I really am a believer, and I know you must know who Joseph Campbell and the hero's journey is, right? That in this is supposedly the basis behind all the base root myths in all cultures across the planet at all times, and it gets reproduced in movies because we're all on a hero's journey. And part of the hero's journey is you suffer a great calamity. You have a trauma that happens to you, and you don't want to get back on the horse. Maverick doesn't want to get back into the F-14 after he has this horrible accident with the backwash and his radio intercept officer dies. But the hero's journey means eventually you have to get back on the horse. Eventually you have to get back into the F-16. Eventually you have to go and confront whatever it is that scared the shit out of you. And that's okay. For all of human history, up until the last 20 years or something, we were celebrating people who climbed mountains that were really hard to climb. soldiers and leaders who went into battle and faced the bullets. Athletes who, against all odds. And now it's like, well, we want a safe space. We don't want trigger words. I don't want to have to read that novel because on page 217, something bad happens. And then they trigger me. And I think that's not who we are.
Yeah.
We didn't get to this place by ancestors who were worried about trigger words. They dealt with famine. They dealt with losing children in childbirth. They dealt with no heat. They dealt with, wars. They dealt with genocide. They dealt with all sorts of things, and they kept persevering. And that's why you and I are here now. We have the same stuff. And this was said recently, and it really stuck with me, that the cave that you're afraid to go in is guarded by a dragon. And the bigger the dragon, the more fierce the dragon, the more you're afraid of the dragon, the bigger the treasure is that's inside the cave.
I love it.
And free will means you can avoid, you can whistle as you walk past the cave and all of a sudden, but sooner or later, you and I are going to have to go in that cave. And that means we're going to have to face the dragon. And when we do that, we're going to become stronger. Okay. And we're going to be able to get that treasure that's been there waiting for us. So I have the opinion that this is not a bad thing. In a controlled way, to confront that fear. Again, in a controlled way. We're not just throwing you into it. And by confronting it, you're already telling part of your mind, that's not bigger than me. I'm bigger than it. And then when we reprocess it, when we rewrite it, when we fix it, whatever it was, that subconscious thing goes, that's taken care of. I don't have to worry about that anymore. I don't have to hide from the trigger words. I don't have to hide from these situations. I can live my life. And the next challenge that comes along, I'm that much stronger to deal with it. I mean, holy crap. You go to the gym to do what? You go to the gym to meet resistance, to meet opposition. When you're putting up weights, you're putting up opposition. Does it feel good? Well, it does. But while you're doing it, it can hurt. You have these moments of like, I don't know if I can do it.
Yep.
And you get people going, do it, you can do it. We go there to be challenged. We pay money to go there to be challenged. Where did we get this idea that we need everything to be safe? We need everything to be comfortable. How are we going to adapt? How are we going to improve as individuals or collectively if we're afraid of everything?
Yeah. And
afraid people are easy to lead. They're easy to tyrannize.
See, and that's kind of why I bring this up too, is because I think a lot of people want it to be easy, and a lot of people want you to do the work, and a lot of people want to come to your couch and lay down and, you tell me what I need to do, doc. You know what I mean? Fix me up. Good. You know what I mean?
I am the equivalent in some ways. Like you said, you did personal training. I know you did not lift the weight for your clients.
Yep. Nope.
That would not do them any good. You guided them through the process. You helped them understand, okay, we're going to do whatever, upper body, leg day, dress day. Here's your nutrition. This is the plan. Listen to these things. Keep going. You can do it. Oh, you've got the delayed onset muscle soreness. That's okay. Take a salt bath, whatever you've said. But you weren't lifting the weights. And my favorite quote that represents this in my mind, this is just me. I'm not saying this is chiseled in stone, but when the darkest days of World War II, when Britain stood alone, when their army had left all of its heavy equipment on the beaches in France, and Germany had wiped out all these major powers on the continent, and it looked like they were going to be next. Churchill said, all I have to offer you is blood, sweat, and tears. He didn't bullshit them. It's like, this is going to be hard, but we're going to win. And if we don't win, for 10,000 years, people are going to say that was their finest moment. Galvanized the nation, this tiny little country, and they prevailed. I know they had our help and they had the Russians' help, but still, he didn't bullshit them. And he didn't give up. He didn't say, well, we're just going to have to surrender. We get the best deal we can, because plenty of people were saying that. He said, all I have to offer you is blood, sweat, and tears.
See?
And we will fight them on the beaches. We'll fight them in the streets. We'll fight them in the fields. We'll fight them on the farms. We'll fight them everywhere. We will never, ever, 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 ever give up.
See?
And I feel like that's the attitude I want to have.
And same with the viewers. And I want it to be about being willing to do the work. You know, it's like, yeah, there's work, and it's not just physical. It's not just emotional. It's not just spiritual. It's, it's mental as well. And so, like, really, really honing that and making this a way of giving people the tools for that work, And so, like, even talking about building this relationship with the subconscious mind, I hear in my mind, like, developing the trust for yourself and building a relationship with your body and, like, letting go. So there's a lot of things that are going to go into that. And so, yes, you can do the work by yourself, but the same as personal training, if you're starting from ground one, you don't know what the heck you're doing. Like, that's a long road, that's a long road, a lot of studying, a lot of hardship, a lot of, whatever, but it's like, or you could have someone that's like, hey, here's the roadmap, here's what to do. You got to do the work. But, and to me, that seems so much more valuable. So that's why it's great to talk with someone like you and hopefully open people's minds to the experience of doing that, to go in and doing the work and getting rid of some of that stuff,
Agreed. Yeah. Well said.
So the last thing I want to touch on is because you have a whole book on it, especially, is building rapport. So and being the customer, kind of that concept of how to connect with people authentically, figuring out a way to understand the subconscious mind, helping you understand potentially people and relationships and things like that.
Yeah. So I would say the first thing to understand that's the most important from my perspective is that most human communication is nonverbal. When a police officer goes like this, everybody knows what it means. And that police officer uses exactly 0 words. When they point at you and then this arm over here and they're like this, you're supposed to turn that way. You don't have to say anything. And therefore, it's very similar in every other setting. I'm just using an extreme example to sort of illustrate the point. But if someone says, have a nice day, if you just think of that concept in the abstract, you think, oh, have a nice day. Well, what a wonderful thing to say. But the person can say that with their voice dripping with sarcasm. They can say it with anger. They can say it when their back is turned to you. And the whole art of an actor is nonverbal communication. That's what actors do. If it wasn't, then anyone in the audience, you should be able to choose at random. And as long as they could read, have them come up on the stage, open the book, and start reading Hamlet. Yeah. And everyone in the audience should be like, oh, this is amazing. People would be bored off their ass.
Yeah.
Right? Because the actors are communicating non-verbally. So if the person says, has a nice day, if they want to stick a knife in that guy's back. Because of the way they say it. Right? And the interesting thing about nonverbal communication, which would be your body language when I'm doing my hands, and my facial expressions, and whether I'm leaning in or leaning back, where I'm looking with my eyes, these are all signals, if you will. And my voice, vocal tone, cadence, pitch, volume, timbre are all communicating meaning. So in order to build rapport with another human being, it's important to understand that the way you're interacting with them is primarily nonverbal. And people who are in rapport, their bodies match each other. And they match as though you are looking in a mirror. Mm-hmm. So if you walk into an airport and you walk past an airport bar and you see 2 people talking to each other, if they're in rapport, they'll both, for example, be leaning on the bar. one person with their right arm, the other person with their left arm, as if they're looking at a mirror image of each other. They may even have one leg crossed over the other. Right? These subtle gestures will be very similar between them. And you could see this. You watch it, you're like, holy shit, oh my God. And one person changes something, like takes their arm off the bar. If they're in rapport, the other person takes their arm off the bar.
Yeah.
Without thinking about it. It just happens. If they're out of rapport or broken rapport, they will be mismatched. So for your listeners, if you're in a relationship, boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife, whatever it is, when you're fighting, your bodies will be mismatching. One person will be standing there like this, and the other person is like this.
Yeah.
Right? One person will turn their back. They'll storm out of the when you're not feeling the emotional rapport, you just instinctively want to break that any kind of feeling of connection or similarity. Because rapport, what it means is you understand me. You get me. I'm safe with you. You're in my tribe. Out of rapport means you're a threat. And people move in and out of rapport. And so I wrote this book because, for salespeople, no one's going to buy anything from you if they don't trust you, if they don't believe you. You can't explain anything about your product or service, and you can't hear what they have to say about what their pain points are, their struggles, or whatever, if they're not willing to tell you. Yeah. So establishing rapport has always been known in sales as being kind of core to that process. But it's not just establishing it, it's keeping it. So mirror, pace, and lead, as you probably know, is from NLP. And that's the study of unconsciously creating rapport with another human being, pacing it, doing it for a while, and then you break something about that. You take your arm off the bar, and if the other person takes his arm off the bar, in that moment you have rapport, for sure, 100%.
Yeah, I love that concept, and I heard it one time. It was really interesting. For my NLP instructor talked about as another example of that was like someone's speaking in like a nice low tone, like low energy, and so obviously meeting them down there, it's a great place to start. But if say you want to bring up the energy, then you start pacing them. So it's like you're slowly starting to bring up your tone, put a little more energy in your voice. And ideally, if you've established rapport with that person, you're going to kind of start to pull them out of that place of low energy.
And a really simple way to remember this is meet people where they are. Meet them where they are, and then lead them to where you want them to be.
Yeah, and most people are probably like, "Oh, you're fine. You'll be fine." And it's like that's not, invalidation at its best.
Right. Exactly. Yep.
Yeah, that's crazy. Yeah, and that's what I think. So there's, I don't know if you've heard of this. Is one of the last things I want to mention, but spontaneous transference. Have you heard of that terminology? Maybe just a fancy terminology for something you already know. But the idea that, like, let's say that I am, we're about to do this podcast, and before this podcast, I've just been talking a bunch of mad shit about you, and I come into the podcast, like it leaks. Yes. Whether subconsciously it leaks, whether you like it or not. So you have this weird feeling about me. You don't really understand why, but it's like because I'm harboring these feelings towards you. Yeah. And so with me spending years serving and bartending, it's like I've always been very aware of that. Yeah. Like a tool I use where it's like I don't go behind my customers' backs and talk about them at all. And when you get a bad tip because you're sitting there talking crap about your customer, like, was it the customer? Or was it that? Did they get a bad feeling about you? You had a bad feeling about them, so they got a bad feeling about you. And it's just like that. It's very, very important to keep aware of, whether it's relationships or not, is how we're kind of paying attention to those things or not. Totally. And how we're kind of matching them or not.
Yep. My latest focus is creating a program for couples who are struggling, and it's part of that is helping people understand the nonverbal communication part, because a lot of the arguments are, I told you I loved you, where maybe you said that while you were looking at your phone. Maybe you said that when your back was turned. Maybe you said that when you were already annoyed about something else that's going on in your life.
Yeah.
And the way this is another NLP precept, which is the meaning of your communication is in how it's received. So your meaning while you were looking at your phone could have been, oh yeah, I love you. You know, of course I love you. That could have been your intention, but the meaning is how it was communicated. And because you were distracted, it was communicated as you're not that important.
Yeah.
Even though you said the words, I love you. But just like have a nice day can be said in an angry way or in a sarcastic way or many other ways. So can I love you? And so to fixate on the words is to lose the forest for the trees. But no one's taught any of this.
Yep.
Any more than they're taught how to be in a relationship. No one's taught that. No one's taught how to be a parent. It's all OTJ, on the job training.
Yeah. And the fact that you can't fake it, I think is really important as well. Like you can't fake the feelings. They show up in your face no matter what.
Correct. And we're all basically going off of what we saw when we were a kid. My parents got divorced when I was 5. What a shit show. Like, that's my training from before I started looking into this and working with people and doing my own stuff with my own relationship. So that's where I'm putting my focus now. It doesn't mean I'm not going to work with people if they come with other things, but kind of like the marketing focus and everything else is going to be on the relationship piece.
Heck yeah. And then you have another book that you're working on, Healing the Wounds of Time.
Healing the Wounds of Time, right? Which is about
that real quick.
Past life regression. I've written about half of that, and it's just about my experiences working with people in past life regression. Kind of like that story of a couple people now who their fear of public speaking came from being executed.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
What a. Just couldn't imagine that actual moment of someone just gives me goosebumps to imagine someone telling a story. Hey, I'm on this wooden stage and this is what's happening, and you're just sitting there like, what in the hell?
Well, what usually happens first, before the words come out, is back to most human communications nonverbal. I can see it on their face.
Oh God, yeah.
Sometimes they're crying, or sometimes they start sweating, or there's a lot of tension, or their face just gets really red. I've had women who were burned at the stake whose face just got totally red right before they told me, oh my God, there are people standing around, I can smell smoke. And then other parts of their body feels hot.
So crazy, dude. What a life, man. What a life. That's got to be a crazy line of work to be in, but I respect you for doing it.
Thanks.
And thank you for coming on the show. I definitely appreciate your time, and it's been amazing talking with you. I know we can continue talking for hours, I'm sure, about all different kinds of things, but I'm grateful for the 2.5 hours or so we've been able to discuss these things. So is there anything
great to get to know you?
You as well. And is there anything that you feel like we haven't mentioned that you want to mention? Anything
just in terms of follow-up, again, my YouTube channel, if people want free content with, try a past life regression or work on public speaking or a whole bunch of other things, it's Blue Sky Hypnosis on YouTube. You can search that. And then I've got 2 websites. My general one is blueskyhypnosis.com. And my new one that's focused on relationships is petermclaughlin.com.
Awesome. And I'll make sure I tag those for you as well, make it easy for people. Appreciate it, of course. Well, thank you again for being on the show. Thank you again for everybody watching that is here for us. So we will be in touch. I'm sure I'll see you again soon. I'll be looking forward to seeing where your work leads you, and follow on the YouTube channel, follow on the Instagram, and I'll make sure to tag in, obviously, this stuff when I get it posted.
All right, Todd. Take care.
Right.
Thanks again.
You take care.